Hello and welcome back to my channel. I have a story to tell you, but it's going to be kind of broken up and it'll probably be a very long video. So why don't you grab a cup of coffee? Well, there are so many videos out there that kind of go point by point by point, how to minimalize, how to be minimal. I think I have more of a journey to share with you here because insofar as practical ideas, I don't know that I could sit down and make that kind of thing. There are wonderful people out there that do a phenomenal job of that. And I'm going to leave a link down below some of the Instagram accounts that I follow that really are simple enough and kind of share that journey with. The reason for putting this video out is sometimes I think we get so caught up in fads, and really some of us tend to stay away from things like that. Others are like, well, I was doing it first. Whatever it is, it can turn into almost this keeping up with the Jones in so much as not keeping up with the Jones. And I think minimalism and just that whole thing is kind of along those lines. But I'm actually here to share my story insofar as wanting to encourage other people and showing why I have gone in this direction. So let's kind of actually start back at the beginning several years ago. And by several, I mean we're going to go back to my childhood. So I am the oldest of 11 children. Not 11 children, I am the oldest of 9 children. We were a family of 11. Let me get that right. We lived in 1,100 square feet. If you think about 11 people and 1,100 square feet, that's 100 square foot per person. That's actually pretty good insofar as what the average house is like today. A lot of people, 4 people, 1,400 square feet. You're looking at like 300 square foot per person. So in terms of stuff, yeah, we had a lot of stuff. We had a large family. We had multiple clothing. But in terms of stuff, I actually don't think we had that many. The only things that I can think about and specify as to a large amount on, ironically, are the things that I struggle with. I wouldn't have thought about this if somebody hadn't made a post. And in the back of my mind, I actually had a video like this that I wanted to come out. But this was kind of like the icing on the cake. In our home with 9 children, being homeschooled and my mom running a sewing business out of our house, guess what we had a lot of? We had a lot of books and we had a lot of material. Toys, in so much as toys, we never had noisemakers. My mom could not handle that. We were noisy enough as it is. And the great outdoors was our playroom. And if we were indoors, we were reading or sewing or playing games. I remember at one point in our life, and I don't remember how long this was, where it was in the timeline of events. I don't remember, but I remember we had a boys' room and we had a girls' room. It took 4 girls to get the boy, and my mom didn't stop there. Oh, gotta love mom. There was a closet in the girls' room. In that closet were shelves. Shelves in the closet. It was a very happy thought indeed. On those shelves were, each of us had a shelf. I had a sewing basket on my shelf. I had 3 dolls. I was allowed to keep 3 dolls. And whatever toys it was just that shelf. As I grew up, I got a paper route, and with paper route came money. And with money, we also had more children. By we, I mean my mom had more children. I definitely was not birthing at this point. And we ended up with, how many girls? 7 girls. And at one point, we were all in our one room. And it was the biggest room in the house. It was actually, I believe, at one point a garage, and it was converted into an add-on. And this room served us girls. Actually, it's still the girls' room. 15, 20 years later, I don't know how old I am. Whatever it is. Anyway, once I had my paper out and once I had that bigger room, I actually tried to create this atmosphere that I wanted for a room, my own room, my decor. A lot of that I still kind of carry today. We're getting there. So my mom had a good setup for minimalism living. 11 people in 1,100 square feet. So I can't really come on here and say, this is what my mom did, this was her method, this is whatever. You're gonna have to talk to mom about that, and I don't know what she's gonna do. But those things carried with me through life. Those love of books, I am still surrounded by books. I love books, I love to read, I love to experience that. But the types of books I was reading was also a huge play in my life, and this is where this is gonna kind of go from one aspect of what I had read with does your childhood influence your minimalism journey to this other aspect. In another way, my childhood influenced my life today, whether it's clutter or minimalism, are the books I read. I read a lot, and my favorite books were ones from the 1920s. 1920s, 1940s, 1800s, but specifically, I really gravitated toward the books where the mom was a wonderful, godly example, but she had a financial guru to about her that was so subtle. Those books were the ones that I really enjoy. Whether it's reading Little House on the Prairie, watching Laura grow up, I was probably more paying attention to Ma Ingalls. Whether it was reading Little Women, I was paying more attention to Marmee. And even books like Lion in the Box by Margaret D'Angeli, again, I was paying more attention to the mom. In one of my favorite movies, classic, it is the Glenn Miller story. June Allison has this scene in there where she's like, I might have mentioned this in other videos, but she goes in and she's like, oh, you need $2,000, not a problem. And she whips out a bank account book and the money's there, and he's like, where did you get all this? He being the husband. And then she's like, well, I just put it in the bank. I mean, things like that stuck with me. And the tenacity and the solidness that these women had growing up in those childhood books I read of burning the midnight oil and saving and working hard for the family and keeping their lives so minimal in the sense of what they wanted for themselves. It was all about giving to the children or to others. Those were the influential books. In a more modern setting, let's kind of put those classic 1920s kind of back on the burner. Modern things still influence me. Have y'all seen Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd? In that movie, Ashley Judd is out of prison. She was falsely accused of something, and she's off to get her revenge. That's not the whole thing of the story that stuck with me, although it is a very good movie with Tommy Lee Jones, so be careful with the language in it. It was when she went to her mom. This daughter went to her mom. And her mom went to the garden, and in the tomatoes, she dug and pulled out this stash of money and handed it to the daughter as a nest egg. When I got married, I had read this is all going to come back, just bear with me. When I got married, I had read something online. It was probably an email sent, forwarding, y'all remember those days. It was about a woman who ended up married, and then the mother gave like this shoebox, and the wife puts it up on the top shelf, and she tells her husband, don't look into that, and he doesn't. However, the wife is dying on the deathbed, and the husband finally takes this box down, and he looks inside, and in it is like 2 crochet doilies and one not finished, and a whole stack of cash. And he asks his wife, he's like, well, what was this for? And she responded, well, when I got married, my mom gave me some crochet yarn and a hook and said, anytime you're angry with your husband, don't take it out on him, whip up a doily. And the husband was so touched because in all these years of marriages, whatever it was, 50 odd years, she had 2 finished crochet doilies and a 3rd one almost done. He's like, wow, like, I'm so touched. That's all you got mad at me for. And he's like, well, what was a lot of cash for? And she responded, well, that's the money I made from selling all the doilies. It's kind of a funny, humorous story, but for me, I was thinking nest egg. Not so much sitting down and crocheting doilies every time my husband's mad at me, but having that to be able to bless somebody if something happened to me. Those were the kinds of things that stuck in me. So now we kind of have that background story, and let's kind of move forward. Like I said, this will probably be a long video. Hopefully your coffee is not too cold by now, but if you need to, I will just wait here while you go warm that up. But let's get going because this is going to be a long video. Okay, so now we have this growing up with me. This is like already into me. Now I'm a new wife. Now I want to make house. And I'm living in a 1950s house with my husband that is 770 square feet. For the two of us, it's not a problem. However, my husband, ready for the bomb drop, my husband's like 20 years older than me. If you want to be more specific, he is 18 years, 11 months, and 22 days older than me. I had to come up with that one time because people were like, how old? So I came up with the exact number. He is 18 years, 11 months, and 22 days older than me. And it works for us. And everybody that knows us are like, wow, you work well together. It works for us. So I married him. He is that much older than me, which means he has a more established life. With that, he had all of his hobbies, and those hobbies are things that are like the worthwhile ones. I'm using quotations because, well, we're just not going to get into that conversation. But he did blacksmithing. He was a mechanic. He did woodworking. He wants to be a pastor. He loves anything that has to do with health. And he does all of that. Those are like his passions. So he had this accumulation of stuff. Not only that, he had a whole room full of books. We're not even talking my books that I bring into the marriage right here. So we bring that into, and I come into the picture, and I want to keep house. I also had a sewing business. I mean, like mother, like daughter. Well, here we are. I have my sewing business. I bring my totes of fabric over, which because trust me, when I have a sewing business, I was making dresses for little girls, and you had yards and yards and yards, because if you made one, you needed to be able to make it in multiple sizes for multiple families for blah, 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 blah. Okay? Anybody that doesn't have a sewing business will not understand this, but I came into the marriage with at least 6 huge Rubbermaid totes of fabric. Blues, greens, reds, pinks, whites, so on and so forth. It was color-coded, and it was enough. Not only that, I came in with all the books I had been accumulating, not just ones that I enjoyed, but ones that I wanted for my children when that day came. Not only that, I also cross-stitched, and I really enjoyed it, and I brought all of that. And I also brought in all the little knickknacks and things that I had built up over the years for that kind of lifestyle that I really liked or thought I liked. So now we have a couple in a 770 square foot. At this point, you guys, if you've been around my channel, you know the story. It was a toss-up between a bookshelf in the bedroom or the television. The television left, the bookcase stayed, which means more stuff, okay? One big thing versus a whole bookcase of a bunch of little things, okay? Think about it that way. And again, did I mention 770 square feet? It was good for us. And then the kids came along. And more kids came along. And even more kids came along. And 5 kids later, and a 40-foot cargo sea van later, I was a very thrifty wife. I ended up making enough money as a side business to be able to pay off our mortgage. That is a whole nother story. But let's just say that one of the ways I did this was to take in all the stuff that people were done with and to resell it. So kind of like an eBay business without eBay. This is when Facebook first came out. So you accumulate a lot of stuff that way. Well, and then you had 5 kids, and we had a 2-bedroom house with 5 kids. And they were young enough that all the kids were in one room. The baby was with us in the smallest room in the house that barely fit our full-size bed in there. And it was a struggle. There was a struggle because the stuff we had and the homeschool we had the 40-foot sea van. So I kept things organized and neat out there. It was literally set up in such a way that it was like another room. In the very back, all of my husband's bookcases were up, all of his books were out. So that was about half of that 40-foot ceiling. So 20 feet of it is his. The next half on one side was about 10 feet of the 20 feet that's left, about 10 feet of that was totes. And I saved totes for clothes up ahead for the children. And on the other side was my sewing totes and a long bookcase with the books that I couldn't fit inside. But on the inside our home, that 770 square foot home, I was constantly rearranging stuff. Constantly. I needed to make it work for us, and I couldn't make this stuff work for us. Did we have a whole bunch of toys? No, we didn't. We had the bare minimum of toys, but it was still a lot of maneuvering to make this work. From that little home, we were there about 6 months with all 7 of us, and it was a long 6 months. But then we moved into a rental, and the whole idea behind the rental was that we would be out of the house, we could fix up that little cinder block house that we bought as a fixer-upper. It needed a lot of updating. And we were going to fix it up, and we were going to be able to sell it. The problem was, now we had 2 households to kind of take care of. And we tried our best to fix that up, but we ended up selling it at a loss. At a loss in the sense that we paid $2,000 for that house. We got everything else back. So not really a loss. Our loss was the rental money that we used to stay in another home for about 3 years, I think is what it was. Okay, so now we are in this rental. This rental is, I think it was like 1,300 square feet, because I remember it being bigger than my mom's house, and it had a laundry room. Like, that was the best day of my life. And it had a dishwasher. That was the second best day of my life. Or the second best thing about that best day of my life. Maybe we'll put it that way. And first thing, right off the bat, my husband and I agreed we are not going to fill this house up with stuff. And we really didn't. We just brought all our stuff in from the other house and realized even all the stuff in storage was still making this house cluttered. It was at that point that I realized that there was actually a different problem here. I had saved all that sewing stuff because I knew at one point I was going to be teaching my children how to sew, and it's very expensive to replace all of that. There was also a point in time when I was making my own cards, and that money helped pay off the house. So I had all of that stuff that I had collected. I still had many, many, many books that I deemed valuable and worthy, and they totally were. You know, I don't keep books that I don't like just so I can have books for the children to read, okay? But I had a plethora of them. It was at this point in my life that I'm trying to figure out, what is it that I'm searching for? And some people could say, well, you were searching for God. It wasn't that. I was trying to figure out why I was so frustrated and why I had to keep arranging some stuff to make it just feel like I could function in our house. That I wasn't having to constantly get rid of something and then replace it with something else. Long story short, too late, we got to this point where I was looking for solutions. I was like, honey, David, that's my husband, honey, David, this is not working. We're constantly rearranging. I'm still trying to figure out what kind of style I like in this house, and I was very frustrated. It was at about this point that the word minimalism came somehow, some way, I don't even remember, into the picture. Something else from my childhood, I think is going to play a part of this, and I'm kind of afraid of forgetting it, so I'm going to put it right here. Another part of my childhood that I really enjoyed was Amish. I loved reading about the Amish. I loved studying the Amish. I loved pictures of the Amish, which more like the Amish lifestyle, not actual pictures of them, because that's forbidden. I really liked them. And that's actually going to play a part in my story a little bit later, but I didn't want to forget that. So, minimalism is this new fad that's coming out, and I'm trying to figure out what exactly it is, and I'm doing research, and it sounds fantastic. No stress, no mess. This is what all this is promising. No stress, no mess. A complete wonderful life, okay? So I'm researching it more. The problem that I kept finding with minimalism was it was typically a family, if we want to say the ones that I finally found that were families, they still went to school. What about those that homeschool and are really like book heavy? Like being visual, I needed to see something visual. Then I had stumbled across Stephanie from Minimalist Mom Life. She is on Instagram, but she's no longer on here on YouTube. I had found her videos, and it was so practical, and I could see a homeschooling family. Actually, there was a part before this that I needed to say. Not only the Amish. It was the magic Marie Kondo. She came out, and it made sense. Keep what sparks joy, get rid of what else. And I did a whole purge. It was actually one of the first videos I ever did on Instagram or YouTube, and they were horrible. I don't even know if I still have them. So Marie Kondo came in. That was kind of step one from this whole thing. Okay, now I'm trying to figure out minimalism as a life, and Stephanie kind of came into my life. Then I was like, well, she still has younger kids, and I have older ones. Like, I can see keeping things simple and minimal for the younger kids, but what about when you have older ones? And I was still kind of searching. And then at one point it was called the Minimalist Homeschool channel, but I think it's now Heavenly Minded Homeschool. She kind of came up in the picture. And then after all of that, Joshua Becker came into my life. So there was a progression, and that's kind of where I'm trying to go with this. The journey to where I am now is nowhere near done, but it was years. I think people are trying so hard to get this done in a month or in a season. This took years. And through this process, this is where the biggest growth happened. It actually was when we finally sold the house and we're going to move to Indiana, and we downsized so even more. I got rid of 50% of my books. 50% of my books. I still ended up taking 13 Apple boxes with us. That's how many books I had. And those were the ones that I was like, okay, these ones I can fit. Not only did we move all of those, and we took a 15-foot moving van, because that was the cheapest we could get, the smallest we could get that we could afford, but still keep it manageable. We took that all the way here to Indiana. And in that, we ended up living 3+ weeks in an Airbnb, which you lived minimally then. You had the things you needed, like your clothes. And we had one bag of school books that we really didn't get to. As December was crazy. We were constantly gone looking at houses, but whatever. And we had a big old trash bag of yarn, of things that we were working through. That basement, the Airbnb we were in the basement, but it was set up like a house. That was 1,500 square feet. And we kept looking around, and we were thinking, my husband and I, this would be enough. Like, you wouldn't need more than this. But we were trying to figure out, all our stuff isn't here, and this is pleasant, and this is nice. You know, people talk about going to the hotels or something, or going to Airbnbs and then coming back and trying to recreate that. So that was 3.5 weeks of living that way, and things did get piled up. We had, okay, we're just going to move on from that. Then we ended up, from there, we hadn't found a home to call our own yet. So we ended up in a rental for about another month and a half. So think about this. We moved from Indiana to an Airbnb, and then we go from an Airbnb 3.5 weeks later to a rental, and we're still trying to find a house. Like, that's a lot of moving. Even during that time, that 3.5 weeks, and packing it all up and moving, we had accumulated enough. And that wasn't the stuff that we had in the storage. We had stuff in storage because we weren't going to put it all down there in order to move it all up elsewhere. And then even when we get to the rental, it was like, do we really want to bring everything here so we can save the money from storage only to have to move it all over again? No, we don't. So we left things in storage, but we brought things that we would need. When we got here, we did not have much furniture. I don't think we had any furniture except for one bookcase that I was adamant we were going to take, and one mattress that was brand new. And I was adamant we were going to take it. We made room for that and we figured it out. Woot! But other than that, we had no chairs. We did have a folding table. Nothing else. And that mattress. So what we got was a couch for Christmas. That was a gift to us. Like, I have never had a brand new couch. It's always been secondhand. I got a brand new couch for Christmas, not from my husband, but from the gal that had the Airbnb. Like, that's what she did for us. Not only did she do that, she put out the word that there was a family from California that needed furniture for a new home. And we got dressers, and we got beds, and we got curtains, dishes, and we got some dishes. And in this rental of trying to work with all of those, it was a huge blessing. And again, we had things minimally, and we were like, let's not bring everything over, let's not make this big, because we're gonna have to move it all over again. So we're living minimally at that other house. But during that time, I ended up with a bookcase that y'all have been mentioning on Instagram and in my videos. Yes, I love that mid-century bookcase. That bookcase was given to us, and outside of that one tote bag of books that I brought, we didn't have anything else brought in. That got filled up with books that I just picked up at thrift stores here. When we needed more clothes, we would go to the thrift stores and I'd look at the books because that's what I do, and we'd pick it up. And it accumulated quickly. Toys accumulated quickly because we have loving people within our community that wanted our kids to have a good Christmas. Things quickly just got out of control and when I say that, I was like, I didn't bring anything in. I'm trying to show this progression of minimalism, especially if you're just kind of struggling. Then we buy our home, and that furniture has now moved here. And we bring all the stuff in from storage. And almost right away, I was like, this is too much. I really missed not having all that stuff, not being surrounded by all that stuff, because I didn't miss it. There were times when I'm like, oh, I need this, and I could go and I could get it. But insofar as a huge portion of what we had, it just became too much too quickly. Here is where a lot of my journey changed. It wasn't seeing things from the minimal perspective of living in the Airbnb and the rental. It was actually starting to read more into the Bible and into the missionary stories with my children with the books we had. And in that, I was starting to notice a couple of things. We actually had a really good conversation with the children, and it had to do with Paul and what Christ had said in the Gospels. Take a pick, I think he said it in all of them. What he had said was, foxes have dens, birds have nests, the man has nowhere, son of man has nowhere to lay his head. Christ had talked about that. And again, in a context, it's like, okay, well, Abraham had this abundant wealth. David had this abundant wealth. So I don't think Christ is telling us to give up everything, but it was our hold, like how much do we really value something? And then we had this missionary story, and it was about Jim Elliot, and he gets to this island, and basically they didn't put their cabin high up enough, and so they had to keep moving all this stuff, and they lost so much of it. They thought they lived very minimally until they lost pretty much everything, and then they realized how truly minimally they were going to live. And those two incidences kind of sparked this conversation of, could we sell everything to follow after Christ? If we knew there was a desperate need, and there's always a desperate need, but if we knew there was a desperate need, would we be willing to sell everything to meet that need, to help further Christ? And that was a huge eye-opening moment for me, because the kids were like, oh yes, we're going to do it. And it wasn't just that. Like, it's so easy to say that, right? So I went to the cupboard and I pulled out some of my Starbucks mugs that I had been collecting. They were just the ones that I personally had bought. They weren't ones that were special and given to me. I'm not ready for that yet. But I pulled out the ones I had bought. And I posted them for sale. And the kids, that right there was so eye-opening for them. Mom, you love these cups. I'm like, I know. We're going to use this money and we're going to send it to a missionary that could really use it. And that to them made so much of an impact. It wasn't just that conversation that impacted me, but my actions to the conversation impacted them. And they started thinking about things differently. In that moment, and thinking of Jim Elliot, I also reflected on a friend of mine. She lived in this trailer. She was a hobbyist like me. She loved books like me, and she had an amazing antique collection of books that I quite often drooled over. She was a Charlotte Mason, amazing mama. So you can imagine what kind of books she had and the quality and the drooling that I would have. Anyway, let's move on from that. They lost everything in a fire. I remember thinking how horrible it was, but being in a position where I was like, you know, thinking about my mom, growing up, I remember her saying, I think I'm going to pack everything up and I'm just going to pull out what we need. And after 6 months, whatever's still in the box, we're just going to get rid of it. And I know she did at some point, she did something like that. I don't know to what extent. I just vaguely remember it in the back of my mind. But hearing how my friend lost everything and had to start from scratch, and remembering my mom's thing, and here I am, ready to sell some of my cups to help a missionary family. Like, all of that came in these waves. And then it made sense why I have this minimalism in my heart. All of these reflections within these past couple of months, like, this is something I have really had to work through. I'm not just saying it was a thought here and there, but a daily reflective thought and thinking process. And I came to the conclusion, and I can move forward with a goal in mind. The goal at one point was I just wanted a clean house. Whatever it took, so that I didn't constantly feel like we had so much stuff that I couldn't keep it clean. Now it was, okay, it's not just about the clean house. I learned that. I learned that minimizing doesn't necessarily mean you have a perfectly clean home. I made a video about that. I'll try to link that down below. But what happens after that? Well, now I can see this whole thing in my life, and I started thinking, what if God has a purpose for me, and God has a purpose for me, but what if there is something behind all of this searching that I'm doing? I remember reading about somebody who sold every single thing they could spare. Every single thing. There's people that have done that to pay off debt. This particular family did it so they could adopt. That was so important to them that they could make that difference. They sold everything so they could adopt. And it has always been in my heart to one day adopt. What if, in this money that I would save, not trying to fill the books of the books that I want to read, or decorating my home the way I want it to be presented, or whatever it is, what if I was actually going back and seeing how little I need for some other purpose? There has been times in my life when I wonder, are we going to be missionaries at some point? I don't know. At one point, it was something we were talking about. Is it going to happen? I don't know. I don't know what God's plan is. But I know that God does put us in positions like this to strengthen us and to help us to grow. And I am growing. I know it. I can feel it. And I have the food to keep on growing. That food is to keep going forward in this journey. And now, seeing what the possibility of an outcome could be during this journey, I suddenly have a different perspective on this. It's not to be minimal just to be minimal to meet this fad. It's not just to have a peace within me. of seeing things so beautifully kept, which, by the way, those are very peaceful looking. It's actually to see what I truly need. You know, every time God talks about what we need in the Bible, it's our daily bread, spiritual and physical, and it's clothing. It's not even so much a roof over our heads. What we need were the food and the clothing. And what is this going to look like? I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea. But I'm starting to see this journey with a roadmap now, for lack of a better word. You know, sometimes you just start on your journey and you don't really know where you're going. And you're traveling, and then you see a destination, and now you need that roadmap to kind of get to that destination. And that's kind of where I am now and how I'm going forward. And when I share my minimalism videos, this is part of the sod buster living. Okay, I'm breaking up with the things that are not helping me grow. And being out here with clay soil, I'm starting to see a whole different perspective on busting the sod and sod busters and all that. So it works within this channel. It's not a minimalism channel. It's not a homeschooling channel. It's not a food channel. It's my life. And I'm sharing this with somebody out there that maybe can use this piece of my life to help them. So if these videos are helpful and inspiring, and when I show you what we've done, if that continues to help and inspire you, I really hope that you leave that comment down below, because when I put these out, I can tell you right off the bat that my stomach tightens and I'm walking around wondering if this was a video worthwhile, if this was worth somebody's time sitting and watching. And probably you've had to reheat your coffee 2 or 3 times, or maybe you're on your 3rd cup of coffee. I don't know. But I really hope this was beneficial to somebody out there. And I want to thank you for watching this, because it's going to be long. And I thank you that you have stuck with it. And I hope that this aspect of my journey, of my life, was helpful to somebody. We are put on this earth to glorify God. And I want my story to do that in some way. God doesn't create cookie cutters. And I think I'm more slow at learning than most people. But I know I'm not the only one out there, because there is a diversity of His creation. And so I really want this to help that person out there that's just struggling with, why doesn't it look like this? This has been a journey, and it started actually when I was young, which means I'm 32. I could have been working on this for 32 years of my life, and I'll probably be working on it for another 32 years. So I hope this video encourages you that are still struggling to keep strong and find out your why. Isn't that kind of what's out there right now? Find your why. Maybe this video will encourage somebody out there to see a roadmap to where they need to go. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.